Hello, and welcome to our next episode of the TMG Fireside Chat. I'm your host, John Mackey. In this episode, which actually is going to be a series of little mini episodes, I sit down for my annual conversation with my really good friend, John Demeter, the president of Wesco HMB. And for many of you that listen, you know John through his business. He is also the writer, editor, publisher of the Halon Herald, and he has been on this podcast each of the last 4 years. And we usually have an intro to the year, which is this series, and then we also have at some point towards the end of the year, just a kind of a check-in to see how things are going. Over the next couple days, weeks, so we're going to figure out how we drop these. We are breaking out a 1-hour conversation into a series of little mini episodes. Short form, as they say in the podcast industry. And each of these episodes are going to drop a couple times a week over the next few weeks, and we'll go from there. So hope you enjoy it. Hope you find this information useful, informative, educational, and a worthwhile listen. So from that, let's get rolling. In episode 18.2, John Demeter and I discuss the regulatory environment and policy changes impacting the fire protection space. We touch upon, review of 2024 and talk about 2025. Then we get into discussion around Honeywell's business. They recently made an announcement about restructuring. We talk about the AIM Act, its implications on HFC management and what does that mean for fire protection contractors and end users. We also talk about some things going on at the EPA with the travel freeze and regulatory changes. And by the time we air this, some of the things that, the new administration is doing with government agencies and what that may mean. And then we also talk about changes in federal workforce and ultimately what it all comes down to, how it impacts the fire protection space. So hope you enjoy this episode.
I agree. And to your point, it's going to be different, right? And it's going to be, how do they, it may not be a technician, it might be an engineer that's come up with the next, maybe it's the next system, right? How do you push gas farther? How do you distribute it a little bit differently? You look at someone like, let's call out Drew again, right? Drew came in this industry as an engineer, started selling sprinkler heads in New York, then started writing specs for engineering firms in New York, and then saw an opportunity around software, and then was part of the development group to develop InspectPoint, which then put him on committees. Then and when you're on a committee and you're writing codes and standards, that has legs for the length of that code. So, to your point, it's a little bit different, right? It doesn't say, in this context, Drew Slocum software. It doesn't InspectPoint. Right. And so
but that was he created and exploited the new technology. And I guess maybe, I don't think it's laziness, but when we look at the four corners of our industry, it doesn't change all that much, does it?
No.
The kitchen systems and portables and suppression and sprinkler and detection, and it doesn't really, and by the way, that's probably a good thing. I mean, the whole idea of codes and standards, it's a sword that cuts both ways. It slows things down, and it makes sure that if you're going to change that, you better come up with a real convincing reason to change that. The good part is it kind of keeps competition out. It's if you're not in there, if you don't have a product that meets that code, it's tough to break in. But it doesn't change all that much, does it? The four corners of our industry.
It does not. I think it's, codes and standards creates a situation where it's like even maybe slower than turning the Titanic. It's a 7 to 10 year cycle to change a code. Right. So that's number one. I think that because we're so rigorous in that regard, the codes would be the anchor, if you will, the piece that slows us down. I think that there's going to be demand for new technology to kind of accelerate that process, right? How do you put, when we see this in the sprinkler side today, there's remote switches now that are being put on sprinkler systems that go back to a central monitoring station that then populates an inspection report.
Yeah.
And it meets the requirement for the inspection. All right.
Yeah.
So how does that get accelerated? Right. That's under the umbrella of NFPA 915, which speaks to remote inspection. And now they're
Yeah.
adopting similar language to codes. But we're 3 years into this code, and Terry Victor, who is one of the writers for the code, will tell you the adoption rate's been very, very slow. Because what's interesting, John, is that the fire marshal has discretion and has the ability to make a decision about what's the best application for that device.
So you need smarts, and you need money, and you need patience.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it then rolls to these publicly traded companies that have been in the space for a long time, right? And let's pick on Ansel and JCI, right? I was at Ansel for 8 years, and we were coming out with new products. This is before Tyco got their arms around it. We were coming out with new products every 2 years. It was pretty methodical.
All right.
Right. Now, when was the last time Tyco came out with anything really innovative that we can talk about? Say, wow, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Well, we haven't seen. I mean, InspectPoint is probably the think of another technology that's rolled out in this marketplace, and I mean, even Novec 1230 goes back to 2001.
I know,
I mean,
24 years ago.
or around that time, right?
Yeah, that's our last agent.
Right.
It's 21 years old, right? Or 24 years old, right? So
I'm trying to think. It was around 2000, I think. I remember that 3M. I'm just going back to my early Hark days,
yeah.
when 3M had a position on the Hark board, and they were there with CEA 410. Remember CEA 410?
Nope, I don't.
No, CEA 410 was a clean agent.
Yep.
3M came out with it, and they came out with it so late in the game that every other manufacturer was already committed to FM200.
Mm-hmm.
There was one manufacturer that didn't have FM200, and that was Pemol.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Pemol?
I remember Pemol. Yeah.
So 3M sold Pemol on CEA 410, paid for all their listings, paid for all their testing, and Pemol rolls out CEA 410. 18 months later, 3M says, "Oh, we're out of that business." There were problems. It might even have been an early PFAS thing, but they pulled CEA 410. If you walked into the Pemol office after that, at a big poster of Pemol's CEA 410, product line, with a big black drape hanging over it. It was very, very, very damaging to their company. Sure. But anyway, but then I watched 3M continue membership on this committee for a couple of years, going, I wonder what they're there for. Why are they here? And it was fluoroketone. It was Novec 1230 that they were working on. Yeah. But even now, and if you want to stay on this for a second here, I wonder if in 2030, maybe even sooner than that, there will be any FM200 or HFC suppression systems manufactured in the U.S. Well, I really wonder that. Will anybody be manufacturing an HFC FM200 system in the U.S. in the year 2030? In the year 2030, assuming that this third leg of the AIM Act, continues to roll forward, and so far it is, the burden on everybody from a manufacturer to a distributor really gets ratcheted up a bit. Absolutely. Number one, manufacturers in the year 2030 can only use recycled HFCs to fill their first fills systems, right? You go all the way down to the end of the stream there. When a distributor shows up at a customer to inspect the system, and if one of those tanks there have got to be filled with 5 pounds, he's got to report that. Every activity up and down that chain becomes a reportable event because it's an HFC, and they're trying to manage emissions everywhere. And I got to ask myself, why would you sell an HFC? if you got fluoroketone. Why would
John,
you sell it?
so remember you were in the room when Dennis Kennedy, I gave a presentation at NAFED, all right, specific to PFAS and firefighting foam.
Right.
And what
Right.
Dennis
Yeah.
said in his presentation, and which has been a message that most of the foam contractors have been carrying forward, the manufacturers aren't touching this, right?
Yeah.
But it was, because of the CERCLA designation from EPA as it relates to AFFF, you have a spill of 1 pound. They didn't clarify whether it's concentrate, or
Yeah.
blended
Yeah.
foam.
Yeah.
1 pound is a hazardous waste
Is
response.
reportable. Yeah.
It's reportable, has to be managed as such, which means you then have to bring a hazmat team in to clean up, dispose of, etc. And the advisement from like the FSSA, we put together an FAQ for foam and said, listen, if you're touching these systems, you've got to manage your liability. Does your insurance provider cover you in that case of a spill? Number one. Number two, can you guarantee that there's no PFAS in that system?
Yeah.
Right. And then number three, how do you manage it? And most of the contractors I've talked to have walked away from foam service and foam systems, AFFF system, old ones, because they don't want the liability. On the other side, to your point about even clean agent fire extinguishers, or excuse me, HFC agents. You bring that to a foam wheeled fire extinguisher, it's the same thing. We said, don't bring that unit back to your shop.
So foam is done. I mean, a PFAS based foam is done, right? Yep. That's only going to be a liability around the necks of anybody in this industry for the next 20 years,
yep.
Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be around for a long, long time. Which agent do you think is more vulnerable? You think HFCs are vulnerable and to extinction in our industry? You think they're as vulnerable as a fluoroketone is, which has got tinges of the PFAS issue?
I think that the difference there is around global warming and atmospherics, right? The refrigerants just don't hold up in global warming and ozone depletion, right? And so you compare HFCs to the fluoroketone. The fluoroketone is proven to be safe for 25 years, right? Low global warmer, low ozone depletion, non-toxic. I mean, so you have good science to support the performance of the fluoroketone over time, right? I think the challenge that we have is from a replacement perspective, no one's developing what's next. I don't care if it's coming from a gas or a liquid. There's nothing in the pipeline right now.
Do you think that FM200 HFCs are dead in our industry?
I wouldn't say they're dead. I think there's going to be a long tail like we saw with Halon. You're going to see a recycle market develop because what do you replace it with?
Well, I think there are probably twice as many, maybe more, FM200 systems in the marketplace than there were Halon systems back in 1990.
Yep.
You've had more years to market those things. Yeah. So I think there will be the aftermarket for it. No, I don't think no one in our business is worried about the aftermarket of FM200 systems. And we're still servicing 1301.
Yeah.
Aviation isn't anywhere near close to to having a replacement for their systems. But the new stuff, I talk to manufacturers. What do you think? And no one's going to say yes or no.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the TMG Fireside Chat. Hope you found that information, the discussion worthwhile and informative. Like we do with all socials, please like, follow, share on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. It helps to continue to get the word out and spread the network, or spread the word, if you will, and get the network wider across the industry and for those that are interested in listening. For any notes associated with this podcast, you can find them on your listening platform, either the intro that you had for the podcast and or the notes for the YouTube channel. With that, so thank you again. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we'll see you in the next round. Have a great day. Be safe.